All right, there you are. So how do I add you now? I love this, Hal. You're waving at me, but I need to figure out how to add you to this. Let's see how I can add you. I am the wrong guy to be running this operation. Try the icons at the bottom. There's a little person there. Ah, there we go. Thank you. All right. Invite. I have invited you. There you are.
Perfect.
This is wonderful.
All right, let me fix myself real quick.
Yeah, I don't know why my head looks so fucking big, but I don't know. What can you do? Maybe heads grow. The heads grow as you get older. Anyway, so we're here. It looks like some people are watching. Sorry for the technical problems. I'm literally the worst person to be dealing with technical problems. I just shut down and crawl up into a ball. But it's taking all the strength that I have to stay in front of the camera right now. But go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. I guess when I tried to get on live, they blocked my live for some strange reason. I guess it said against community guidelines. I don't know what I did. This is the first time that's happened in 72 talks. So I usually introduce and I say, how's everybody doing today? This is Chopping It Up Hardcore with Hal Capone, discussion number 72. Today I'm speaking with the legendary Eric Paul from the amazing noise rock band Arabon Radar, the Chinese Stars, Doomsday Student, and of course Psychic Graveyard. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you taking time out to talk to me. I've been a big fan for a long, long time, so I was stoked, when you accepted my request to come on here.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate you asking me.
So usually when I first start off, my first question that I always ask is, what kind of music were you in before you got into like the punk scene? What were you listening to as a child, and what drew you to music?
Um, so as a child, I listened to a lot of like classic rock. So I was raised by a single mom, and my mom has seen some absolutely legendary concerts. Sabbath, Black Sabbath, Alice Cooper, Zeppelin. So just from her having those records playing around the house, that was sort of the first music that intrigued me. A lot of people, you know, I know there's a lot of debate about this band, but I loved Kiss growing up. I loved the showmanship, the creepy satanic esque vibes they were alluding to and stuff, and I just was really intrigued by it all. So I had a lot of like Kiss albums growing up, and used to put the makeup on, and then actually when I got into high school, I'm sorry, junior high is kind of when I started discovering a lot of like post punk
Yeah.
and punk rock, punk stuff, and then from there it evolved into weirder punk and started to seeing like the Jesus Lizard and stuff like that when I was a freshman, sophomore in high school. But I'd say like through my more like elementary school up until junior high, and I still listen to a lot of classic rock. But classic rock was the kind of thing that got me really excited about it. And I actually started started playing music as a drummer actually in the fifth grade. And I used to just sit around when I got my drum set, in like the seventh grade, just learning Zeppelin songs, learning all the classic rock songs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So was Jesus Lizard kind of your springboard into like the more punker side of things? I mean, what band kind of grafts you in kind of mindset?
I think the band that sort of shaped me into wanting to explore music that was a little bit more challenging was probably Six Finger Satellite.
Mhm.
So I actually grew up with them. Well, the singer. So
Yeah.
in high school, I worked at a nursing home, and I worked with the brother. John Ryan was the brother of Jay Ryan, and through John, I would, I met Jay, and it was sort of the beginnings of when they were putting Six Finger Satellite together, writing some of their earliest music. So I remember hearing the demo tapes and you know, um, the Weapon EP as it was sort of coming together. I think I was about 16 years old,
Yeah.
17 years old, maybe a little bit earlier. And through Jay and through John, they started turning me on to a lot of that music. So I remembered they were the first ones to play me Can, the first ones to play me Captain Beefheart, Wire, Gang of Four,
Mm.
Second Edition, The Birthday Party, all of that more dissonant guitar playing stuff. So a lot of the stuff that the stuff that sort of ultimately came into the music that I was a part of started there with those two guys. And then when I was 17, 18, that's when I started to go see Six Finger Satellite playing in Boston and Providence and New York. And then when I was about 19, I believe, is when they released Pigeon is the Most Popular Bird. And that's when they started touring more
Yeah.
as a formal band. So then when watching them do that is what made me decide that I wanted to do that. And I never had any other thoughts of doing anything else in my life. I just, watching them, I was like, that's whatever that is, I'm doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for better or for worse, that was the life I chose at 17 years old.
Now, were you born and raised in Providence?
Just outside.
Outside.
So yeah, I'm in a town, it's called Lincoln. It's literally 14 minutes from the border. If so, from the house I grew up in to the Providence line was 14 minutes. And I remember that because I was always driving in to see shows. And for some reason, when we would see the sign, like, welcome to Providence, we'd always start taking note of the time. But that's where I grew up. And Jay Ryan and John Ryan. So Jay was the singer of Six Finger Satellite. John actually went on to make some pretty cool music too. He was in a band called Von Ryan's Express. He was in a band called Onlyville Sound System, and he actually released this amazing solo record called Organs versus Furniture. It's still one of my favorite records of all time. It's just him with one of those giant old timey like bossa nova keyboards or organs,
Oh no.
and it's just him singing with it, and it's like the weirdest fucking thing you'll ever hear, but I love it. But anyway, yeah, so I don't know. I sort of lost my place, but they lived in Cumberland. I lived in Lincoln, so that's kind of why we were so close in proximity. And then when I turned 18, I moved to Providence and to be around all the musicians and the bands, and join the community of musicians.
Yeah. And what kind of scene was like Providence back then when you were, 16, 18 years old? Were you listening to like because hardcore back then in like the mid to late 90s was like pretty prevalent in all those clubs like the Living Room and Club Baby Head.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the Channel was like a long time ago in Boston, but that was big. And so were you kind of into that scene, or was that kind of music not your taste?
The only band, and I know we talked about this through Messenger, but the only band that I really felt like exhilarated by or compelled by, if you will, was Drop Dead.
Mm.
And I think it was just there was some other energy that Drop Dead had, or some other message that they were communicating that was not tangible. It's really hard to explain. It's like that feeling you have when you watch somebody and you're like, the music could almost be irrelevant, although it's what they were doing was incredible.
Yeah.
But it was just this other energy that they had, and I just loved that band so much when I first saw them. But that was probably, one of the only bands locally that were in that world that like attracted me. I actually didn't follow that music so much. And actually one of my first jobs out of high school, I actually worked at the Living Room as the door manager, the door person. Like, so I took
Yeah.
the money and stuff, you know. So I got to see a lot of that music that came through the living room, and I didn't dislike it. It didn't, it just, I didn't connect with it.
Yeah.
I think is the fairest way to say. But that doesn't mean that I haven't seen bands in that genre that I was really excited by, because I was, you know.
Yeah.
It's just, I think that I just look for something else sometimes with bands, and I've never quite been able to put my finger on what it is. But Drop Dead had
Yeah.
it,
But
or has it.
it's funny that you said that, because I was watching the St. Vitus talk, and you said when one of the first times you saw Drop Dead, it kind of scared you how
Oh, terrified.
it was, and yeah, and I kind of had the similar you know, thing when I saw Drop Dead too. I was like, they started right off the bat, and the energy and just wildness of it, I was kind of
Yep.
taken back, because I was used to kind of like the mosh Corey stuff back then. And so I was like, whoa, what is this band? I'm like, and then I just started getting into it more and more, because it was something fresh that I hadn't seen in a while. And every time that I went to Providence, it was always like, I saw fresh bands that I didn't necessarily get, the what am I trying to say? Kind of like exposure to, I guess you want to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of saw, Lightning Bolt kind of open my eyes, because it seemed like a very strange scene compared to Boston and up in
Yeah.
New York, stuff like that. It was more of like a metalcore-ish, like Converge, Cave stuff. And Providence kind of had its own thing. Even though I was going to like Club Babyhead way back in the day in like the 80s, where I saw DRI play up there, and I saw a band called Excel from California. I don't know if you're familiar with that band, but that's,
No,
uh,
no, no.
yeah. But I digress. I kind of go on a sidebar for a little
Yeah,
while.
but I understand exactly what you meant, because I feel very familiar with what you're talking about. Generally speaking, Boston had a more yeah, like a hardcore culture, I guess is if the right word, or just that they access that energy in a different way. And we were like the more outside thinking, outsider art version of that music,
Yeah,
where that high energy had a little bit more of a controlled environment, but still the energy is really high and powerful, you know. But I mean, I remember seeing Converge a few times growing up in the area, and I've always thought they were very talented, and I enjoyed watching their shows. But I never found myself wanting to listen at home,
yeah,
you know, or a lot of that stuff. What I wanted to listen to at home was like, yeah, like Lightning Bolt, Jesus Lizard, the bands that were tapping into something uncomfortable.
that being said, too, Arab on Radar kind of played with a lot of the kind of bands
Yeah.
that you guys went on tour. Did that feel funny to you, just because of the difference between kind of like what you were into and what the shows were lined up like? Because when you guys went on tour, I mean, you guys played with everybody from like, Wolf Eyes to Usurp Synapse to,
Yep.
like everyone in between, but a lot of it was like the screamo hardcore type of stuff
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
played. Was that kind of weird for you, just because it was not particularly your style?
Yeah. I mean, I think the difference at that time, you know, and it's kind of hard to sort of articulate, but at that time there was a more acceptance to bills being more diverse.
Mm-hmm.
So like we would play, I mean, remember so many shows that we played where it would be like Los Crudos, and then like Dianoga, and then us. Like there was just something about that time. Like if you were a touring band and you had an album out or a couple albums out and you had a fan base, there was no hesitancy about just putting the bands together, and
Yeah,
people would just sort of go, and they may not like all of the bands, but they would sort of watch them, you
yeah,
know. And as I noticed the difference now, or maybe even in the last 10, 15 years, bills have become more homogenous,
mm-hmm.
or more curated.
Yeah,
So in some ways, it sounds strange that Arab on Radar would play with like the Makeup, the Delta 72, and then, you know, Codeine,
Yeah,
which was I think a bill we did once, right?
yeah,
But then it wasn't as weird. It was just like people would be like, oh, that I'm not into that band, or they would watch it, just for entertainment purposes, but never sort of follow us.
yeah,
It was just that kind of strange time. But I think, but I generally liked all the bands. Like I generally, I would like seeing bands that were doing different things because it was kind of interesting to sort of take from them,
mm,
see how they were interacting with their own audience, how they were constructing their songs, as nerdy as it sounds, the equipment they were utilizing, like things like that. So we were looked at it as like a learning process, and I just looked at it as a really cool time in my life to experience all of these bands. But you know, there was a lot of times that it didn't go well at all. Like
yeah,
people would just be like, "Who the fuck is this band? Get them off the stage," because we were so different.
yeah,
But we also didn't have. There was no place for us then.
mm,
There wasn't a lot of bands at that time that were couldn't put three bands together in any given city that were doing something in the sort of noise rock or whatever it's called, right? So
yeah,
there had to be these eclectic bills. But now, or as time goes on, you could now find more bands that were into that kind of music. But I think the only type of music that's ever stood out to me as like, what am I watching right now, was in the late '90s, was the emo music. I was
yeah,
really I was freaked out by the emo. I remember the first emo show we'd ever been on was like the Fireside Bowl, which was a very popular venue in Chicago for all different styles of music. And, they would play a song and then there would be like 15, 20 minutes of talking
yeah,
and this audience interaction and these band members confessing things. And I remember just being like, I don't know if anyone else finds this surreal, but I'm finding this incredibly surreal. Like I was
yeah,
captivated, unnerved by it.
yeah,
That stood out to me. Yeah,
yeah.
that was a strange time.
Yeah, but and it was like a big boom at that time too, because there was
Yes.
all those bands like Casket Lottery, the Get Up Kids earlier on, Small Brown Bike, Hot Water Music,
Yes. Yep.
like all those type of bands that it was
Yeah.
all of a sudden like a big boom. Also, Piebald up here in New England was
Yeah.
like big in that department as well. So yeah, it kind of captivated me too. I got swept into it. I still listen to that stuff
Yeah.
regularly because I try to
Yeah.
keep my palette open to
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of music that
Yeah.
pretty much keeps in the DIY type of thing.
Yeah.
That's
And I don't judge it. I just remembered, 20 years later, having such vivid memories of, oh, the next band is up or the band before us is up, right? And then going out and watching them as they're sort of putting their guitars on. They play a song. I was like, all right, well, they're kind of doing that sort of genre, and I'll see it through.
yeah,
And then, suddenly there's audience members coming on stage and talking about an experience. And I'm from Rhode Island in like New England, and we just don't talk about shit, like we just bottle it up and drink it away, right?
yeah,
So here we are in the Midwest or wherever in Chicago, and people are like, well, my dad was very abusive and this and that. I was like, wow, these kids are fucking unreal.
yeah,
They're just
yeah,
laying it out there, right?
yeah,
And then their song lyrics are about it, and I just remember it really sticking out to me. And
yeah,
it wasn't a judgment thing. It was just, wow, this is unique, and also, wow, the power of music, and also this is this is another way to use art to deal with shit. We just
yeah,
do it differently.
yeah, definitely. I wanted to speak about how Arab on Radar got together. I know the story
Sure.
kind of. You guys were all trying to get a job at the specific place, and that's how you met, and then it kind of evolved from there. And so, can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that?
Well, I can tell you that's a lie. We actually just made that up once for a press kit thing. Like, yeah. So every album, we've never really enjoyed the sort of uh, the trappings of the music business. We hated promo photos. We hated having to do like one sheets and press kits and all of these things that you have to do to sell albums, right?
Yeah.
And they're kind of like necessary evils. So what we would do is every time we would have a new album, I think that was for Soak the Saddle actually, but I could be wrong, where we would just make up a different origin story as part of the press kit, and none of them were true. None of them. They were just lies. And it's funny because someone recently actually sent me or screenshotted the Wikipedia page, and I think it's actually on the Arab Unwritten Wikipedia page, and I think it's so funny because I'm like, this is literally none of this happened. This is amazing, because it's more mundane than that. I was working at a place called Bread and Circus, which would eventually be bought out by Whole Foods, and I was working in the deli, and actually Jay Ryan, again, the singer of Six Finger Satellite, worked in Whole Foods as well, because it was called Bread and Circus. A lot of musicians worked at Bread and Circus because it was very artist friendly, and then if you needed to tour, they would allow you to tour and stuff. They were really, really promoted like having a life outside of work, and that was really cool. So Steve worked in produce at Bread and Circus. And Steve at the time was in this band called Pollinate, and they were kind of this sort of, I don't know, a little bit noisy, a little bit poppy, kind of like a lot of different musicians that would eventually go on and find their path, but hadn't quite found it yet. So everyone was fighting for their own aesthetic kind of thing. And I think Steve was getting frustrated at that time, and he was actually in the band with Andrea, the bass player.
Yeah.
And Craig and I had been in bands. Craig's the drummer of Arab Radar, had been in bands in high school, and even while Craig was going to college in Emerson, we would still try to put bands together. But at the time, I had no band, and Jay had seen, because I grew up, he had seen Craig and I perform, and he's like, "You should meet this guy, Steve." And so Jay introduced me to Steve and said, "You guys should start a band." I literally said that at a Bread and Circus. We had white smocks on behind the deli counter. And then I met Steve, and then actually I just sort of, Steve and I connected. We're still such close friends. We're talking 30-something years of friendship. I actually, 3 years ago, married him and his wife. I got ordained to marry them and stuff. So yeah, it started there, and then we kind of looked around for other musicians, and Jeff had been Jeff would be like somebody that would go see a lot of the shows that we would go to and stuff like that. So then we approached Jeff early, because at the time we were obsessed with Pigeon is the Most Popular Bird. They had 2 guitars, so naturally we had to have 2 guitars, because you couldn't do what they did without 2 guitars. So then we talked to Jeff about it, and then we kind of struggled to find a drummer. Craig was in college, and at the time there was a local guy who was he's like really into jazz music, and he temporarily joined us just so we could sort of get the band off the ground. And he played drums, and we played under the name Umbrella at first.
Yeah, Umbrella, yeah.
Yeah, and then we released a couple songs on compilations and stuff. And then we wanted to take it more seriously. The drummer wasn't really involved in the writing process. He came from a very different background than us. And then John Ryan, Jay's brother, offered to play drums for us. So we actually then changed the name to Arab on Radar, and put the 4-song demo together.
Yeah.
And that was the first 4 songs that we wrote collectively.
Yeah.
And then we started to then kind of work on an album, started talking about touring, and John was very familiar with the touring life, because his brother was doing it, and he actually wasn't very interested in it. And it was around the time that Craig was finishing up his degree at Emerson. And I said, hey, my childhood friend is a great drummer. We played in, these bands in high school. And, if John doesn't want to tour, I think Craig would probably want to tour. So Craig came down in his senior year of of college, and he tried out, and it all just clicked so well.
Yeah.
And then we started writing Queen Hygiene, and then we'd recorded Queen Hygiene, and then started touring after that. So that's kind of the story. I wish it was something more mystical, but it ultimately started with us behind a deli counter, wearing big white schmucks, and just saying, "Yeah, we'll make a band together," you know.
And that was in 1994 that you guys first started?
I think it was 94, 95. That area is a little blurry. I know our first single, I think, was 96 that we did.
Oh, I thought that like that you guys had the
Or
demo.
95. Maybe it
Yeah,
was
demo
95.
that came out in 95.
You may know more than me. Sorry. I just hit my phone stand. Yeah, it may have been 94. Oh my God. I can't believe I've been doing this long. Yeah, 94. Um, yeah, because the demo was made with John. I do remember that. We recorded it at the Parlor, which was Six Finger Satellite Studio
Yep.
that they were building at the time, and they ended up recording Severe Exposure at and some of their other albums. But I do remember we put those 4 songs together. We played some local shows with John. I think it was 3 or 4 shows. That's
Yeah.
about it, or 3 shows maybe.
Yeah.
One being that Marilyn Manson show that we'd messaged about.
Yeah.
One, we entered a contest, like a band contest called the Rock Hunt, that was sponsored by a local radio station.
Yeah.
That was one of the other 2 or 3 shows that we played with John. And then I think that's when Craig joined, and then we did the Kangaroo Pig Roast split,
Yeah.
and
And then
then Queen Hygiene.
Queen Hygiene came after Kangaroo one. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the early parts of Arabon Radar, what was the mindset for your lyrics? Like, where did you get your ideas from? Like, did you have that idea before going into that? Because I know a lot of people talk about the wildness of the lyrics, like,
Yeah.
the erotic, like sometimes vital
Yeah.
lyrics.
Yeah.
Where did that kind of stem from? And
Sure. Yeah. No, this is a great question. So some of the earlier, I didn't have a plan going in. I'd always sort of enjoyed poetry and writing and stuff like that, but had no idea how to do any of it, and enjoyed how some like it was like Nick Cave was a big deal, like, because I remember he had a book called King Ink, and I thought it was really cool that he had lyrics and poems, and he was kind of dabbling in both worlds, or
Mhm.
trying out both worlds. And I remember being more excited about the idea, but not knowing how to execute it.
Yeah.
And then when we started to write some songs, it was right around the time, because I remember this because I was 19, I believe 20. It was right around the time that I started to go to a counselor. So when I think I was 18 years old, 19 years old, I was hospitalized for anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation. And I started to, in the hospital, and then shortly after I started to see a counselor and was diagnosed with PTSD
Mhm.
from these events that I endured as a kid.
Yeah.
And I go to these counseling sessions all the time and really have a tough time getting started, or
Mhm.
just understanding how to even begin talking about it.
Yeah.
So the counselor at the time said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't you just keep a journal
Mhm.
of these, of abstract thoughts or images, or and at the time I didn't know what she was doing, but she was trying to sort of get access to memories that I
Yeah.
was repressing, or memories that were troubling to me, or things like that. But
Yeah.
at the time I didn't know. I was just like, all right, that sounds good. So I just started writing down these journals. And then when we started writing songs, I started using these journal entries or bits and pieces of it, and started kind of putting them together as lyrics.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of the lyrics were almost like incoherent, imagery based lyrics, but they were all sexual in nature because what I endured. I'm a sexual assault survivor,
Yeah.
a survivor of incest, domestic violence, all that stuff. So what at the time I was doing was writing down all of the events
Mm-hmm.
before I even had a moment to process them. And then starting to put them onto albums and stuff before I even understood the idea that people would even listen to them, you
Yeah.
know? And at the time, it was just such a, I don't know, a private thing.
Yeah.
And never thinking anything would come of it, if that makes sense. So I didn't really put any limits to what I was putting on the albums.
Yeah.
And then eventually, as we got popular, I started to understand the impact that they would have, and I I actually feel really regretful, or some of the lyrics, because I think that looking back on them, I think they're a little dangerous or a little irresponsible. I can and as the band got popular, I started to be faced with more challenges, people questioning me about them, questioning the irresponsibility of them and stuff. But in as much as I tried to explain them away, well, they were this and they were this and they were this and I
Yeah.
didn't know, it was really I just didn't know, um, but it is almost the kind of thing like, well, because you had good reason to do it doesn't mean you should have done it kind of thing, and I understood that. So it is what it is. But that's where the vile nature of all of the lyrics came from. Quite
Yeah.
simply, I felt vile. I felt as a person, I felt violated. I felt ugly and dirty inside, and I felt you know, depressed, anxious, really fucking angry all the time.
Yeah.
And that's what the lyrics were expressing. And I think one of the things that I did was I would have these feelings, but I would kind of hide behind like this. Like sometimes I wished I just changed some of the pronouns around.
Yeah.
I know it's as simple as that sounds, but instead of saying like I did these things or I or it was actually like somebody else doing them to me.
Yeah.
But I didn't. It was almost like I was too proud or too you know yeah, too proud to admit that the things had happened to me. So I was like, all right, well, I'll just say I did them. It was weird. It was a lot
Yeah.
of confusion, and but that's kind of where it started. And I'm pretty comfortable talking about it now. Never in my 20s would I've talked about it, but as the band released, Yahweh the Highway and grew in popularity,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people picked up on what I was communicating.
And even,
And I
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, go ahead.
Portraying those, it must have been kind of therapeutic for you, though, going through that stuff. Did it at the time make you feel more at ease, get stuff out, like in music?
I think so. I mean, I think that the only way I've ever known how to cope with what I went through as a kid was through music. And I think that's why I still do it. As strange as it sounds, I don't know any other way to cope with life except for writing and making music. I do other things in my life and I enjoy those things.
Yeah.
I'm a college professor. I'm a dad. I'm married. Like I have all these wonderful things in my life, but still, the I learned this coping mechanism of impulsively creating to feel better about things. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and now I'm a little bit more careful about it with my lyrics, and I deal with different things now. Like so, an interesting thing about when you have some sort of diagnosis with mental illness, sometimes you can when you're in treatment for a long time, at first it feels like an avalanche of shit, but then you start to sort of understand the illness better, and then you start to be able to even speak about them, and you grow comfortable. There's a level of acceptance there, but yet those things still affect you when you're faced with new challenges.
Yeah.
you know
Yep.
so for example, I have a son who's nonverbal on the autism spectrum, and it causes me a lot of pain. I love him to death. I
Hmm.
wouldn't want any other person in the existence of humanity to be my son, but it comes with a lot of challenges, right?
Yeah.
So those challenges can be a little bit triggering for me.
Hmm.
Um, he's nonverbal. That's really challenging for me. I
Hmm.
always use communication as a way to combat um, the things in my life. Like words were everything to me, and
Yeah.
now I don't share them with my son. Very
Yeah.
triggering for me and stuff. So what it does is it sort of creates these new challenges, and I understand how they reflect back onto the older versions of myself,
Yeah.
but now I'm dealing with them in the present tense. So what do? I be creative. I write lyrics. I write songs. I do all these things, and they're new problems. They're new challenges. They're certainly not me dealing with like some of the abuse I had as a child or some of the assaults that I experienced and stuff. I hardly think about them now.
Yeah.
But now I'm in the moment and I have these new things. But when you have this illness, everything that you experience is filtered through the illness first.
Yeah.
And that's what's so challenging about it.
Yeah. I was never by the lyrics at all, or the
I'm sorry.
I was
I
never
missed it.
back by the lyrics or the content
Uh-huh.
that
Yeah.
you. It was more. I took it as art, and I'm a big film guy too. So
Yeah.
a lot of people, shocking films kind of turn people off and stuff like
Yeah.
that. To me,
Yeah.
I would rather see something in like, not that I'm drawn to like shocking stuff like that, but if it makes me feel a certain way, then it's done its job. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
with the lyrics that you guys were doing, you were doing, I never looked at it as a bad thing. I always looked at it as an interesting thing. And I think a lot of people thought it was interesting, not so much like offended by your lyrics. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it was art and music that was coming out. So you kind of have to take it like that and not. I know you probably caught some flack for some of the stuff that
Yeah.
was, written in the lyrics, but on my side of things, I enjoyed everything that Arab Radar did, and I was interested in the lyrics. Not that I was like delving into like those dark things, but it was interesting to me, and I was always like looking forward to the next album and reading the lyrics and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, they were certainly like they were a different approach.
Mm.
I will give you. I feel like at least I can. I feel proud of that in regard that it was like so many lyrics are formulaic. They're saying the same thing, just a different way,
Yeah,
over and over and over again. I mean, it's almost just unbelievable. I mean, I still follow music. I love bands that are putting records out in 2021, but very, very, very rarely do I see a lyricist that's taking a different approach.
hmm,
And that's one of the things I was doing, for better or worse. It was no one had this sort of these strange compositions, and then certainly there wasn't a guy with a high pitched voice screaming these highly, sexualized or provocative scenarios. It just
yeah,
wasn't, in that way it was unique. But I think that a lot of people feel, in retrospect, I think a lot of people do feel like you, that it was just an art and that it was more about communicating a feeling, because that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to make the audience feel in some ways like how I felt.
mm,
And that's what I was trying to do.
yeah,
And I don't know why. I don't know why, if it was a good thing or a bad thing. I was like screaming out and into the void, or screaming out at the world, like,
yeah,
hey, I'm dealing with this. Come along with me.
yeah. Uh, Speaking on Drop Dead, I wanted to touch base on the tour that you went out on, kind of like one of
Yep.
your tours with Drop Dead. What were some of the memories that you had on that tour?
Sure.
Um,
So if I remember, I believe that was our second tour, but if I'm not mistaken. So the first tour that we did ever as a band um, was it was hard to, no one had heard us, so it was really hard to um, get shows, if you will. And I remembered that at the time, Six Finger Satellite invited us to play in Chicago. So
right.
when they invited us to play in Chicago, because we were excited about it because it was one of their bigger cities. They had a lot of fans there, and it was the only show that they could get us on in that tour they were doing.
Yeah.
So, like total maniacs, we're like, yes, we'll drive 17 hours to play the show, right? We weren't gonna say no. So that was our first tour. I think we literally drove like 24 hours out to Iowa, a show
Yeah.
in Iowa, played a show in Iowa, played that Six Finger Satellite show, played some random shows in Michigan, and drove home. It was like a
Yeah.
week or something. But then when Drop Dead got wind of the fact that we were becoming a touring band,
Mm-hmm.
they liked our music, would regularly come to see us play locally. So then they asked us on the tour. So that was kind of like our official real tour, if
Yeah.
you will. And they took, they were very DIY at
Yeah.
that time. We played maybe half were venues, half were houses.
Yeah.
So we played up and down the East Coast in living rooms and basements, and it was wild. And it was a really new experience for all of us.
Yeah.
So we were just taking it in and loving every second of it.
Yeah.
But couple of things that stand out for me is that we didn't go over very well with their fans. They were not interested in us at all.
Yeah.
We had maybe from any given night 10, 20 people that were into it. Maybe they
Yeah.
were a little bit more open-minded.
Yeah.
Maybe there were people that were following Drop Dead for the same reasons I followed them. But largely their audience was had a very distinct culture.
Mm-hmm.
The way they dressed, the music they listened to and stuff. And it seemed like we didn't fit into that culture. So
Yeah.
largely, the shows we were met with some indifference.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, we just were excited to be playing,
Yeah.
to the 20 people that liked it. And then maybe there's 100 people at least watching. It
Yeah.
was enough for us to have a good time. It was
Yeah.
enjoyable. But I remembered a couple of things that stood out as we played the show in Greensboro one time, and in fact, Greensboro, North Carolina, was one of those shows that actually seemed like the audience was more receptive to us than some of the other places that we had played, except maybe New York City, because we
Yeah.
played New York City on that tour. It might have been the Knitting Factory, but that show felt like it was more an open-minded audience.
Yeah.
So we get done playing Greensboro, and they cleared out this double living room, so the show took place in there. And then I remember after the show, people, or in between bands, people would go out to the front yard and hang out. And I remember just being really blown away. There was a shed there, like for tools, but it was like the shed that people would go in to do inhalants.
Yeah.
And I remember it was the first time that I'd ever been around people like huffing things in a designated area and getting high and then coming back out.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is different. All right, this is cool, right?
Yeah.
And then people would then kind of mill about on the sidewalk, and then it was almost like you couldn't have scripted it better, but a pickup truck drives by with all of these guys that were just angry that this thing was happening
Yeah.
in their town, and they started driving by and throwing bricks at all the people watching the show, and multiple people got hit
Wow.
with these bricks in the front yard of the show. And I remember just being like, this is something else.
Yeah.
We are not in New England anymore.
Yeah.
And I remember being really taken back. And actually, the drummer of Psychic Graveyard is from North Carolina.
Yeah.
And he he has a lot of funny stories about growing up in the South. And I remember sharing that story with him, and his reaction was like, "Yep, that's North Carolina," But I remember just being like so freaked out about that occurring. I was like, "Oh my God, they could have killed somebody!" But to them, it was like, "Look at these weirdos doing this weird thing I don't understand. I'm gonna hurt it,"
Yeah.
And they kept swinging around. And like it was crazy. And then I think someone ultimately called the police on them, and it was, we just sort of stayed out of it. And then the other memory that stands out, of course, is playing under the couch and meeting the Locust for the first time. That is still a very vivid memory.
Mm.
So the Locust Jenny Piccolo tour, um, met up with Arab on Radar and Drop Dead in Atlanta, and I remembered it just being such a wild night. I was blown away by the Locust, blown away by Jenny Piccolo, obviously blown away every night by Drop Dead, and then just meeting the guys in the Locust, and now we've become lifelong friends. Ultimately, Justin put out a lot of the albums,
Mm-hmm.
and our first West Coast tour was to support the Locust, so they were the ones that brought us out to the West Coast for the first time, and that was a really good experience, because Justin went back and started promoting Arab on Radar on the West Coast. And there was something with, I remember there was this distribution called Bottleneck that I think Sonny K ran,
Mm-hmm.
of the VSS, and they started selling the Arab on Radar records there. And then they really caught on out there. So the first time we went out to the West Coast, we had really big shows. And that was the first time that it felt like there was something occurring with the band. So that was kind of nice.
Yeah. Was that the Oops the tour? Or
No,
that
that was just an earlier
earlier?
tour.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we the Oops the tour actually I think was the last US tour that Arab on Radar did.
Yeah.
We had done a few. We did that West Coast tour. We did a full US tour while so Yahweh was released while on that tour.
Yeah.
Like, of course, being the amazing business experts that we are, we were like, this will be a great date for the tour. And then the record, of course, is always delayed.
Yeah.
And so we started the tour without the record. And then we were in Omaha, Nebraska when we got the shipments of Yahweh, the Highway
Yeah.
albums. So we did a full US tour partway through Yahweh. A funny story about that too is we had a booking agent named Michael McDonald. I'll never forget that because his name was Michael McDonald. And then halfway through the tour, he stopped responding to us, and some shows were falling apart, and it was just kind of like insanity. Was like, we're out here. It's pre-cell phones. It was like dial-up internet at
Yeah.
that time. We couldn't get in touch with him. And then it turns out that he had like a nervous breakdown and then was like hospitalized. And we were like halfway through our tour somewhere in like Montana.
Mm.
And, our agent was just like, well, I don't know. So we were kind of just showing up to shows, not knowing if they were going to happen or not. So that was kind of our first full US tour before the Oops tour.
I had one more question about Arab on Radar, and
Sure. Yeah.
When Andrea left, what
Yeah.
was mindset? Were you looking for bass players, because like she was a pretty important part of the band the first few years.
Yeah.
How did you guys go about saying you're not going to have a bass player anymore?
Sure. So Andrea didn't leave abruptly. Like Andrea is still one of my favorite bass players. She's so an amazing person, so talented. I still regularly talk to Andrea, but her departure was, about a year in the making.
Yeah.
So, Nick is asking if I'm in a costume. No, it's just a green shirt. So it was a year in the making. So at that time, we knew that she was going to be moving. She was getting really into this is my day shirt. That's what I wear black at night, green during the day. That's what I'll tell Nick. Anyway, so we knew she was moving to New Mexico to study. She went to a massage school, I believe, massage therapy school. She was really into like holistic healing and, yoga and stuff like that. And then really wanted to pursue that. So we'd known that it was sort of coming to an end. And actually some of the bass lines on Rough Day at the Orifice, I remember that we actually wrote like
Mm.
the Jeff and Steve wrote some of them because Andrea was kind of detached a little from the band.
Yeah.
And then almost as if some angel came into our lives, or I should say two angels. We saw in a 6 month period Harry Pussy and US Maple at Fort Thunder.
Yeah.
And both of those shows were probably up there with top most top 10 most influential shows I had ever seen
Yeah.
in my life. I saw, seeing US Maple play Long Hair in Three Stages,
Mm.
seeing Harry Pussy play whatever the hell they were playing, but I loved it.
Yeah.
And we were just like, we don't even need a bass player.
Yeah.
These guys are doing it. And I remembered we took more influence from US Maple because I believe Todd Rittman was playing a lot of the low end in that
Mm.
band. I think he actually had like a bass amp going, and so when he would go to the lower strings, it created some of the bass.
Yeah.
And then Mark would handle some of the more high end stuff. So they had this full spectrum sound, and that was more influential than Harry Pussy. But it was the Harry Pussy show was incredible, and that's sort of when we decided. I even think it was that night because I went with Steve and the whole band. We went,
Yeah.
and I think we were like, why don't we just try without it? And then we started to try without a bass player. And I will tell you, it was challenging at first.
Mm.
We did a few shows. I remember our few shows without a bass was with the band Colossamite. It was actually Ed, who plays in Deerhoof now,
Yeah.
Nick, who was in Dazzling Killman. So they were a cool skin graft band at the time, and we were excited to play with them and stuff. And we played 3 shows with them, and we sounded very thin. Um, it just didn't have that full spectrum of sound that
Yeah.
we inevitably would manufacture. So we played those 3 shows. It didn't We didn't feel very good about it, and then we started to experiment a little bit more with how can we, cover the whole spectrum of sound with just 2 guitars, and that's when we started. Steve started kind of got the SG and
Mm.
started running through a bass cab, and he
Yeah.
started just his guitar lines were almost like bass lines, and
Yeah.
then Jeff kind of would hang out in the more higher registers, and then we started writing songs that spectrum started to fill out more,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then it felt exciting. But I would tell you, for a few months rehearsing for the Colossamite shows, oh, John Dietrich was in Colossamite. I did not know that. How do I not know that? Anyway, John plays in Deerhoof too, but oh, now they're just getting weird. I'm gonna ignore that one. But yeah. Anyway, so there was 3 months where we were like doubting it, but then ultimately, then when we wrote um, some of the songs on Soak the Saddle,
Mm.
I believe, where Steve started playing the lower stuff, it really started to click. And then we
Yeah.
said, oh, we can do this.
So when you guys broke up and then the reunion tried to happen in
Yep.
2010, what kind of fizzled that 2010 reunion? Was it just people didn't want to do the same thing? It's because of such a long period of time. I mean, without getting into too much.
Sure. Let me just ask if I understand. So are you asking like why the reunion why the reunion attempts like stopped? Do you
Yes.
mean like people like fans or people like us, like the
No,
band
like
members?
the band members themselves.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. I thought you meant for a minute I didn't know if you meant like people that were audience members, because
Yeah.
the audiences were pretty big when we did the few of the reunion shows that we did. No, it was just interpersonal conflict.
Hmm.
The very first time the band broke up, um, Craig, Steve, and I, to be as diplomatic as possible, could not see eye to eye with the guitar player Jeff, and we tried to work things out, and ultimately we couldn't. And then a lot of years had passed, and I think there was a desire to want to play those songs again.
Hmm.
The desire to want to make music that felt more closer to me,
Yeah.
or like, because Chinese Stars, I have a lot of mixed feelings about Chinese Stars. I think there was a lot of a bit of an identity crisis, like trying to not to sound like Arab on Radar all the time, trying to do something else
Yeah.
outside of that was outside of my ability in some way, or what felt outside of my ability, because
Yeah.
it was like driving me crazy.
Hmm.
Don't sound like that. Don't sound like that. It's like, well, but that's the music I love. Like,
Yeah.
this is the music I was raised on.
Yeah.
How do I not do that music? I tried,
Yeah.
but in the end, it was tough. So that yearning to sort of get back in touch with music that felt part of my being, part of my soul, my body, my heart. And then we quickly realized that still the interpersonal conflicts were there.
Yeah.
We just it was be the three of us would look at an apple and say that it was red, and Jeff would look at it and say that it was green, and we
Yeah.
could never resolve
Hmm.
um, a lot of the differences. And it got and then it would then get hurtful, and then it would get toxic,
Yeah.
and then it just, in your 20s you can handle a lot of that kind of that sort of tension, or that fucked up band dynamic,
Yeah.
because you're 26, 27. But in your late 30s, you can't do that. You can't. It's just, there's no place for it.
Yeah.
So it was really hard to to have to put an end to it. But what was the point of doing it if it didn't feel right, or it didn't feel good?
Yeah.
So
Speaking on Chinese Stars, um, was that the mindset for you, kind of trying to do something different in like kind of almost like the not dancey feel, but like obviously it was a lot different than Arab on Radar
yeah,
musically.
yeah,
Similar, but a lot different. And I know you said you kind of struggled with like trying to get into that
yeah.
specific framework of that. I personally, I mean, I still have this.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
have this, and I also will never get rid of this as well because
Ah, that's great.
I'm a CD guy. I'm almost 50 years old, so like I sold
Yeah,
off vinyl a long time ago, and now, of course, I'm
yeah.
so all I have is CDs now. So, but I will never get rid of these ever. So, Chinese Stars was big for me. I saw
Oh, good. I
you
like
get
that.
daughters, and
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask about kind of
Sure. Yeah.
why
I'd love
why
to I'd
why
love to
the,
talk
why
about it.
the switch up with the Chinese Stars?
All right. So if you really, maybe this will help your perspective, but if you really look at Chinese Stars, right, and then you look at the early Arab on Radar stuff, I think you'll see similarities,
Yes.
right? So if Chinese Stars was the first time that Craig and I had played with a bass player since like '98,
Mm,
right? It'd been a long time.
yeah.
So and the bass player of Chinese Stars was Rick, who played drums in Six Finger Satellite.
Hmm.
So when the two of them got together, they immediately started accessing Pill's second edition,
Yeah.
which has all those like um, those disco-esque death
Yeah.
disco beats.
Yeah.
Pop group was coming up. What was the other a big record at the time? I'm blanking on it, but it was kind of drawing from that like freaky disco
Yeah.
stuff. Um, and at the time, there was the Rapture, the early Rapture records. We'd actually, in the later years of Arab on Radar, played with Rapture in when they were playing their earlier stuff.
Yeah.
And we were really, really big fans of their early stuff, and we loved how they were incorporating like, the pop group. And Birthday Party too has
Oh,
some of
yeah.
that kind of heavy bass, thick jaw wobble bass lines. The
Yeah.
drums not as much, but we were tapping into that. And that's also what we're tapping into with Andrea, what Craig and Andrea were tapping into in the earlier days.
Yeah.
So when Rick and the song started there. So Chinese Stars, excuse me, started with Craig, Rick, and I, and we
Mm.
would just go down, and I would just kind of put some effects pedals on, and make shit up as they were just playing these like really dirty second edition style beats, you know.
Yeah.
And then it sounded empty. So then Paul, who was in Paul Vieira, who was a popular musician around town who'd been in some other compelling local bands,
Mm.
came in, and then that's kind of where it started. But then we released like, you know, released some stuff, and then it was like, you know, oh, I miss Arab on Radar. Oh, I want this thing back. Oh, you know, and you try not to listen to those things, but you hear them, you
Yeah.
know, and then when you go to write something, it does get in your mind a
Yeah.
little bit, you know, and you're like, oh, I don't know, that might have been my tendency, but I can't do that. It'll be too much like this, you know. So then you just start driving yourself fucking crazy, you
Yeah.
know, and then it's like, oh, that guitar line's too close, or you know, and then you kind of lose sense of like what you're doing, you
Mm.
know. And I think that, you know, Rare Sensation was, you know, tapping into some of the pop group stuff, some of the second edition stuff, some of the more, you know, contemporary bands at the time that were doing those sort of you know, disco punk stuff, because we
Yeah.
liked it, we enjoyed it, we were listening to those bands, you know. Um, and then there was always like me, like, oh, what do? I don't want to sound like this, I don't want to sound like that. It was like, this is like, I was always in my own head,
Yeah.
and in some ways I've even since apologized to the people that I played with, and I said, I'm sorry I was so in my head. I was just, you know, Arab on Radar was my life,
Mm.
and it was a music that I think Jeff even said it best in that documentary, that you can sometimes make something out of nothing, and that's literally what we did. We
Yeah.
just sort of figured it out from somewhere, and it became something, and then I didn't know what else to do, you know.
Yeah.
So the Chinese Stars was you know, a tough time for me. I was also grieving Arab on Radar, and I was
Yeah.
um, searching for what to do, and you know, and you know, it drives you crazy, you know. It's like you try to put, when you're being creative, put that stuff aside, but you're also a person who's influenced by, you know, the voices.
Yeah. And how was the Daughters tour that you went on? Because I'm friendly with like, you know, all the guys from Daughters. So
Yeah,
how did
yeah,
that?
yeah. So at that time, it was like hit or miss, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So like I remember, for example, playing, and I talk about this a lot because Charles, the drummer of Psychic Graveyard, is from Charlotte, but we played Charlotte, and there was like 6 people there,
Yeah.
like, you know, and it would be hit or miss, and then we would play like I remember Baltimore was like really packed,
Yeah.
and then, you know, so it was kind of like at that point where like we were doing good in some cities, but
Mm-hmm.
not a popular enough band to pull in every city.
Yeah.
And Daughters were at that same point where they had some cities that had really that they had caught on in, and then some that they hadn't.
Yeah.
So it was, you know, a lot of highs and lows in terms of the shows.
Yeah.
And but you know, we still made the best of it, and we still had such a nice time. And you know, and those guys have, for me too, because of the touring, and because I actually met them when I know we're circling back to the beginning of the talk, but I met those guys because they were in a band called As the Sunset that would play
Yep.
at the Living Room, and I was the door guy at their shows, and that's
Yeah.
how I initially met them.
Yeah.
But then, you know, then our bands started play together. I think Arab on Radar even played with As the Sunset, happens, played with As the Sunset a few times. That is a tough band name to get out of my mouth. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, that was, you know, it was, you know, lot of drinking, a lot more drinking than I do today. That's for sure. Some shows were great, some shows were not,
Yeah,
but largely it was, pretty uneventful. We just, had some good nights, had some bad nights, but just, just a grinding tour. It was
yeah,
good.
yeah. I've known those guys a long time too. I think I've known John and Lex since they were 14, 15 years old.
Oh, wow.
Because I had been going to the living room as well. And John and Lex were in a band called Cast Off Skin before As the Sunset Sets even
All
got
right.
yet. So
Oh, wow.
I had known those guys for a long time. And also, speaking of like old people that we know, Wes Isold,
Yes,
I
yes.
him up in New Hampshire. He used to be in a hardcore band called Javier, which I could possibly be his first band that he ever played in. And I would see him all the time up in New Hampshire because we would go to the same shows, and I would go to
Oh,
the
wow.
band played in as well. I think there might be a video from me of his old band. I'll tag you in it on my page.
Oh, wow. I'll tell Wes about it because Wes is, we've become very close. We actually met formally on that tour. Actually, that was probably pretty eventful. So that Daughters Chinese Stars tour was actually where I first befriended Wes,
Yeah, yeah,
and I actually believe on that tour he even told me about Heartworm, or that he was starting to put a press together, and now that's who I release my books with.
yeah, yeah.
And I mean, again, after 20 years, um, a lot of it is fuzzy, but I'm almost certain that's when we became friends. And actually, some girls at some point jumped on the bill.
Yeah,
So they did. I think they did the West Coast with us, if I'm not mistaken. So I actually got to spend some time with Wes on that tour and
yeah.
stuff. But yeah, so that's kind of where our friendship started too. So I guess that is pretty a monumental tour in that regard, that I made a lifelong friend, and he released my books and stuff.
Yeah.
So
Wes used to be a beast in the mosh pit when he was young. I'll tell you that.
oh really?
Probably when he was 15, 16. Yeah, he was a beast in there. Sure. Um, but speaking like kind of on the Chinese stars, like, and you were kind of missing Airborne Radar style. Is that kind of how Doomsday Student kind of, because you kind of
Yeah,
delved back into the Airborne Radar
yeah,
vein of
yeah,
music? Is that kind of what you were missing?
yeah. I mean, that's really what it was. So one of the one of the one of the positive things to come out of the reunion was that I got to play music again with Steve.
Hmm.
And I had missed him so much. I had missed his guitar so much. I missed his presence so much. And I missed his friendship. And that was the heartbreaking thing, that when we realized the reunion wouldn't be able to sustain, the three of us had that thing that we had been craving a long time back in our lives. So
Yeah,
we decided to just, why don't we just keep playing, because this is what we need in our lives at this point.
yeah,
So the three of us, again, we played for months and months again, where we even tried to make the band work with
hmm,
just the three of us.
yeah,
Steve tried a lot of different like combinations where, some of the lows would come out of one. We tried loop pedals. We tried a bunch of stuff. So before Doomsday Soon had a name, it was originally just going to be a three piece,
yeah,
and we tried and tried, and again, it was that point. It just, for whatever reason, we never got it to a point that we felt confident about it. And then we started talking about bringing in someone else to round out or fill out the songs.
yeah,
And also, you learn how to write songs, or you learn how to do things like on the job, for lack of a better term.
yeah,
And then it becomes really hard to do those things in a new way.
yeah,
So we were struggling to be like, well, how do we introduce a new part here? How
hmm,
do we add, like, if I stop singing, what can we do here? Like
yeah,
things like that. So
yeah,
just structural, arranging, songwriting stuff, we were like, we need other elements because we know how to write songs with multiple elements going, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Like, for example, when you listen to Lightning Bolt, they kind of learned with the two of them at the start how to create these compositions with just the two of them.
Yeah.
And because they learned that way, they're incredibly successful at it. Well, we didn't learn that way. We learned by having multiple, it's like multiple colors to paint with, if you
Yeah.
will. So then that's when we asked Paul to start playing with us. And we had worried at the time that, it would cause Jeff a lot of anguish and stress. But at the same time, we had to do some soul searching. Like, do we put our lives on hold and we not be creative?
Yeah.
Because of somebody that has this role in our lives. And we ultimately decided that we had to sort of stay creative because, again, as I mentioned, I don't know what else to do. And none of us knew what else to do. So the four of us got together. And then actually, if you look back on the early days of Doomsday Student, we actually didn't put our names on any of the bios. And then our press photo didn't have our faces.
Yeah.
And we actually went through great lengths to hide ourselves, hide our identities, because we were trying to sort of be respectful.
Yeah.
To the hurt and that Jeff might have been feeling, and
Yeah.
also we also just wanted to sort of get back to the things that originally excited us about making music, and it was like, fuck press kits, fuck pictures, fuck all that shit. We just want to write songs and play shows. So we ended up, even our first bunch of shows, this is our band name, we're just playing.
Yeah.
We didn't tell anyone who was in the band anything about it.
Yeah.
And then ultimately what happened was when Jeff did have his online freak out about the band,
Yeah.
he's the one that actually made the band popular because he told everyone, like if he never said anything, we probably would have just sort of been, having minimal success and, minimal circles and stuff. But it is what it is. But yeah, we really did want to get back to the basics, and it was about playing that dissonant music again, that aggressive music, and immediately I felt at home again.
Yeah.
So it felt good. And then, it was unfortunate that the band had to wind down. Craig, the drummer, he's been dealing with some ongoing medical issues that have made playing the drums really challenging for him. And again, it was just the outside of our control thing. And then and then I started playing with Nathan and Charles and Paul again with Psychic Graveyard. And Psychic Graveyard is intriguing in a sense that I'm trying to do things that are outside of my comfort zone. A lot of the last album had no guitars on it. Like, I'm trying to do stuff.
Yeah.
But it feels a little bit better than it did with Chinese Stars, where I was trying to operate outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
But I had all of these insecurities and voices in my ears all the time. I have none of that now. I'm just sort of having faith. Nathan he's just brilliant, and I just have faith in what he sends me.
Yeah.
And I have faith that Charles is going to put down rad stuff, and faith that Paul will put, some interesting parts in. And even though it's outside of my comfort zone, it just doesn't have those insecurities, and it feels kind of nice to have. That's really refreshing.
Yeah, definitely. When I heard A Jumper's Handbook with Doomsday Student, I was like, wow. Like as much as I love the Chinese Stars, I was like, oh, this is the great shit right here. Like I was, and then that, like, seeing the videos, because I love the visuals of the videos that you guys put out. I mean, Disappearing and the other one is Angry Christmas.
Oh yeah, Angry Christmas. Yeah,
I love those videos so much. About the shirts that you guys put out, especially the gray one with the it's like the people image, and I was love Doomsday Student just because it brought me back. You know what I mean, to the Arab days, and so I like talking about that. I also wanted to ask about how the new shows went with Psychic Graveyard. I know you got to play a few shows before all shit started like exploding. How did those shows go for you?
Yeah, Psychic Graveyard has been a challenging band to get off the ground because we released our debut record um, was we released it before Charles was even in the band,
Yeah, you
and
drums, right?
yeah, yeah, I played some drums on it, and then some of it's a drum machine, and at the time it was there was a little bit of uncertainty about whether Doomsday would still be a band, and there was some uncertainty whether Psychic Graveyard would ever be a live band, or there was just we were doing it for really pure reasons of just making music and enjoying ourselves.
Yeah,
And Nathan and I have been friends a long time before making music together. So more than anything, it was just wonderful to spend time with a friend.
yeah,
And that was in essence what it was. But then when we got a clearer picture of what we wanted Psychic Graveyard to be, we wrote Bluebird Vacation, and
mm,
Charles is on that and stuff. And then we released it, and we had all of the tours lined up to promote the album, and
yeah,
then the pandemic hit,
yeah,
and then we wrote in the pandemic just because we didn't know what the fuck else to do with
yeah,
ourselves, and released another record, and hopefully getting to promote it in 2022.
yeah,
But yet there's so many things that are still up in the air. But we've had a challenging time getting to promote some of the records. But we did do 3 shows down in Texas,
yeah,
and one in Arkansas, and we had a great time. We
mm,
played a festival called No Coast Festival in Denton, and we had such a great time. And the, there was a really good audience,
mm,
or like a lot of people there, and it was a little tenuous because there was still, you
mm,
know, proof of vaccination, masks, stuff like that. A little bit of an anxiety, but generally speaking, it was really nice. We played outside, and there was just turning dark, and
yeah,
it was great. We had a really really nice time. Played Austin with the OCs. John Dwyer's been a friend for a really long time, and that we had some technical issues at that show, which you can't do anything about,
yeah, yeah.
right? But we still had a wonderful time, and then we played at a state park in Arkansas,
Really nice.
in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and that actually was a really really nice show as well. A lot of people at that one. I mean, a lot of people were at all the shows, and there
Yeah,
was an excitement and enthusiasm, and people were really excited that they were actually seeing music again. So it was kind of this great energy, if you will. And then we played with some pretty cool bands at all of the shows.
yeah,
I, we saw this band Deeper from Chicago who were really cool. We saw Drug Mountain from Dallas, or no, Fort Worth. I think they're from Fort Worth.
yeah,
They were really good. We saw Chat Pile. We played with them. They were great. I mean, we played with some great bands. So
yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Um,
yeah.
I don't want to keep you for too long, so usually at the end I do a little rapid fire. But for
Okay.
the special talk, I want to list names of Providence clubs, and I just want a one-word description from you of these clubs. All right,
Okay.
before we get into these. All right, one is Lupos.
Uh, the first word that pops into my head, money.
Money. All right, my next one, Safari Lounge.
uh, grimy.
Yeah, I saw His Hero Is Gone. That's the only time I went to Safari
I
Lounge.
love I love Safari Lounge though. I
Yeah,
love it.
it was fun going there to see that show. All right, my next one, Club Babyhead.
Joy, just because of all of the amazing things I've seen there.
Yeah, me too. I agree. The next one, AS220.
Fondness. So that's where Craig and I played our very first show
Mm,
together. We played the old AS20, like
yeah, yeah,
old one that was on Richmond Street,
yeah,
upstairs from Babyhead. So we played there, and I just have had so many nice experiences there. So I would say, yeah, a fondness. Yeah.
Yeah. My next one, Fort Thunder.
Oh God, just as fond. I'd say excitement. There was so much excitement when you stepped into that door. You
Yeah.
stepped into that room.
And
Yeah,
my and the last one, the living room, of course.
urine.
Yeah, it's literally the CBGBs of Providence, Rhode Island.
It's disgusting. I have when I worked there too. Oh my God, some of the stories. I'll tell you one funny story. I can't believe I'm telling this story, but I'll never meet these people. But as the door guys, I eventually graduated to like the night manager, so I would kind
Yeah,
of have to more responsibilities and the band Godsmack played there, and they did it as a kind of like a favor or kind of like a we're big popular now, but we're gonna play where we started.
yeah,
Oh my God, Max Creek, one word. Max Creek played. I used to get all my drugs there. They were just drugs would be all over the floor at the end of the night. And Max Creek was like a little hippie jam band that would play, and it was just like a fake Grateful Dead concert. But anyway, so Godsmack played. It was like 1,000 people in a 500 capacity room. But the reason they played there is because Godsmack's manager was the drummer of the band Extreme from
oh,
Boston,
yeah, yeah,
and the owner of the living room kind of helped Extreme get their start.
yeah,
So he was kind of like hey, come, give me your popular band. We'll charge $30.
yeah,
Everyone makes a lot of money, pays rent for a few months, right? So I'm like looking. So the roadies are kind of like carrying the stuff out, and I'm closing up, and I'm looking for the tour manager to settle up with them for the band. And I walk into the dressing room. Do you ever go to the dressing room at the newer living room?
yeah, yeah,
All right, it was really disgusting. So I
yeah.
walk in there, and the singer is just having sex in that dressing room on a table, and
Oh,
there's just like
oh,
beer everywhere. There's a fruit tray, and I just walked in on him, and I was just like, what am I doing with my life? What is happening? It was one of those moments. But I would see shit like that all the time.
yeah, I
I
can.
was breaking up fights all the time. I remember one time I'm convinced I saved someone's life at a Madball concert. There was like five guys beating up one guy, and I just jumped over him and just started looking at him like a caged animal, like he's had enough, he's had enough. And I was like, I saved your life.
That's,
Yeah,
oh,
but
definitely,
urine, because it always smelled like urine in there.
yeah, true. Um, I'll now I'll start with the quick rapid fire questions. My first question: all-time favorite New England punk hardcore band for you, all time?
Nah, Drop Dead. If it's Drop Dead in that
Oh yeah,
category,
definitely.
100% Drop Dead. Will
Uh,
always be Drop Dead.
my second question: what was the first punk hardcore show you attended,
Um,
if you can remember?
I mean, geez, it was. Would you consider 7 Seconds? Oh,
Yeah,
it might have been Bad Brains before 7 Seconds, though. It was either Bad Brains or 7 Seconds in the '80s at the living room.
that's a good first for sure, definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
My next question: what was your all-time favorite show that you played personally, like the top show that you played personally that stands out the most?
Hmm. I think one that stands out the most is we was in Doomsday Student. We played a festival in Paris, and there was just something about it. There was maybe like 3,000 people,
Mhm.
and the energy of the audience and the sound. I know that's a strange thing to be excited about, but it just sounded so good on stage.
Yeah.
And it was called La Sonic Valette, or La Sonic Valette,
Mhm.
I think is the festival. That's up there. That's probably one of the more exciting. Like, like looking back, I mean, there's been so many, but that was a really exciting show. There was a few shows that we played with Chinese Stars played with the Blood Brothers
Yeah.
that stood out because they drew so many people that we got to play in front of a lot of people, and That's just very exciting. I mean,
Mm,
it's just you can't deny that playing in front of a lot of people is exciting. So
yeah.
that you know that we played the Glass House in Los Angeles,
Mm,
um, and there was like 1,200 people there, and that was a really fun show.
yeah.
It's just exhilarating to sort of be be being playing in front of 100 to 200 people, which is amazing in and of itself.
Yeah.
But then you go and play in front of 1,200, 1,500 people. There's an energy there. There's an excitement, and it feels like a more of an out of body experience.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Definitely.
so that was up there. We opened for the Yeah Yeah Yeahs once with Chinese Stars, and that was a very similar feeling too.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people were there, but there was a lot of people.
Yeah.
And, it was really nice to play with them, because Arab Radar actually played with the Yeah Yeah Yeahs at Rutgers University,
Yep.
and that's where we became friends with them. We hit it off, and I don't know, just sort of became friends, I guess
Yeah.
is the best way. So it was really, and there was even a lot of excitement about them too. And I think we were headlining that night, which is really funny to think about it. But there was a lot of excitement about them, and then sort of reconnecting with them years later after they had their success,
Yeah.
and just and a feeling excited for them, like
Yeah.
being like, wow, these really talented, genuine people are having success, and it always feels great when that's happening
Yeah.
for people that you care about.
Yeah.
I always love when my friends have success, because music is really challenging to
Mm,
be successful in, and also when they're good people, and the people that play in EAs are really good people. um, so playing in front of that many people and sort of being able to sort of celebrate that night with them stands out a lot too.
yeah. Definitely. Definitely. All right. My next question. Um, what was the all-time favorite hardcore punk show you attended that you didn't play that kind of blew you away?
uh, Let me think. This one's tough. I, I, I've never. Could you consider the Boredoms punk?
No, definitely. Yes. Yes.
Okay, I saw the Boredoms, and I, I enjoyed it so much I cried. It was fucking amazing. And I don't know if you consider it punk, but I saw Crash Worship,
Crash Work.
um, in New York City at Coney Island, and that was incredible too. So I don't know if they're considered punk per se,
Yeah.
but
It's 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 in that same vein, definitely.
yeah, yeah, I mean, that's the Boredoms were just, I had never seen anything like that in my life.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I saw the Boredoms at Lollapalooza in Providence.
Yeah, I saw them too. Was it at the airport?
Yeah, with Nick Cave
Yep,
and
yep. I
the
was
Green.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Tribe
I was
Called
at that show.
Boys. That was a great Lollapalooza, definitely.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
my next question. I'm a big movie fan. I watch movies all the time. What was the last movie you watched?
Oh, this is tough. Uh, oh my God, it's going to be very embarrassing. Do I have to be honest?
Yes, please be honest.
Home Alone.
Home Alone. That's my daughter's favorite movie. Never-
Oh, it's in my head. Yeah, Home Alone. My son obsessively watches it. He's on the autism spectrum and obsessively does everything. So with the Christmas, he's been watching Home Alone. But movies I watched for myself.
Yeah.
The last movie was the documentary about Sparks.
Oh, nice, nice,
Yeah,
nice.
because I typically I like movies, but I like the more nonfiction stuff. Yeah, I don't know why. Like when I was younger, I used to get really into. I think I've just been like a little bit disappointed with a lot of movies, like.
Yeah,
But I'll always like. I'm excited that P.T. Anderson has a new movie out. I will definitely see that movie.
yeah,
I want to see the new Wes Anderson movie, like, but I, and there's occasionally some horror movies I get excited about.
Hmm.
I loved Parasite, you know, but
Right.
for the most part, I just I don't know. I just always watch documentaries. I think I'm turning into one of those old guys that just sits around watches World War II documentaries and gets angry at everything.
Yeah. The last movie I watched was like, I think I'm kind of cynical with horror movies too. I keep trying to find one that actually I like, and watched a movie called The Night House last night, which was supposed to be like, Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 95, and everybody's giving this great review, and all the jump scares were so scary. Your butt, your butthole was clenched the whole time watching. I watched it, and I was like, "What did that? That was supposed to be good." I thought it was horrible. I thought it was absolutely horrible. So, uh, speaking of horror movies, my next question: all-time favorite horror movie for you?
I think because of the memories associated with it, it's Poltergeist. It was like the first movie growing up that genuinely scared me.
Yeah,
So I recently watched it again, and
yeah,
I was like, I loved it for so many different reasons. I
yeah,
loved it for like the sentimental value of it, and I loved I love watching movies that are set in the 80s now because it
yeah,
was like when I grew up. So there's this nostalgia thing, and I had all of that in there.
yeah.
I think I love that one a lot, but um, I think you know outside of that, um, there was an American version of it called The Strangers, but it was I think it was like the original version of it,
Mm,
and it was about these these young kids that just killed a family for the sake of it.
yeah.
And I can't remember the title of it,
Oh,
but I
was it like,
remember.
was it Funny Games?
No, no, I do know that one where they do like a home invasion,
Yeah,
right? Is that one? Yeah. No, it was a I think it was a Scandinavian movie, and it was that movie, The Strangers, was loosely based on it, where it was just like a family that just these masked people kill them. I remember just being really like terrified watching that movie. I'll try to Google it and remember the name of it, but yeah. But I mean, I like Poltergeist.
yeah.
That's my,
So,
that's my answer. Or The Shining, of
yeah,
course.
yeah. The
Yeah.
clown pulling the kid under the bed is like the scariest part. Like when I was like,
I, oh yeah, I didn't go in a closet for we're like talking 3 years. Like I mean, I was like, this is terrifying. Someone said them. Maybe it is them. Could be that.
I'll have to look it up.
I love looking at the comment. I'm getting all these questions. We should. I don't know. They're probably gone now. I don't know how this works. But
Yeah, I might
somebody.
scroll through. I only have two more questions for you.
All right, let's do it.
I don't know if you listen to hip hop, but I'm kind of a hip hop fan, mostly
Yeah.
90s boom bap style. What have you been listening to for hip hop, if you have been listening at all?
All right. So you're gonna think this is funny. So I use Spotify for as controversial as it may be, but I'm also an obsessive vinyl collector. So I feel like maybe I'm rationalizing my use of it, but I always buy the albums that I like on vinyl.
Yeah.
But out of convenience in my car, driving around, I like Spotify. I'm sorry. Um, uh, and At the end of the year, they give you the 2021
Yeah.
top 10. So my top 10 songs from this year were all rap and hip hop.
All right.
My number one most listened to song was Monster by Meek Mill.
Oh,
And then there is a woman named Armani Caesar
mm-hmm.
that I'm blanking on the name of the album, but one of the songs on that album was like number three.
Yeah.
There was a Drake song,
Really?
number six. Like, so I do listen to it a fair amount. I love Kendrick Lamar. I
Yeah.
love his work. That was there too. But it is funny that the top 10 was like all
Mostly
like,
hip hop.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But then, I mean, it's an exciting genre. I mean, it really is. So many people are doing such innovative stuff. I think there's a really exciting DIY for the most part. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of DIY musicians. or DIY labels and DIY artists, and I think there's a lot of excitement. But like anything else, there's a lot of not great stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, but then as you go deeper into it, every year, uh, it starts at like number 10. I start getting into the music that I like associate myself with.
Yeah.
But I'm like, wow, maybe I do listen to rap on hip hop a lot. I do it at the gym a lot though. I don't know. Hip hop is awesome when I'm on like at the gym. Maybe
Definitely.
that's why.
And my last question, what are like a few of your favorite songs to play live for you personally? Like what songs kind of are real special to you to play live?
Like in my career or
In
recently?
in your career, yeah. Like between like
Oh,
Radar or
sure. Oh, that's a cool question. I've always loved playing the song "Birth Control Blues." That was an Arab on Radar song that I loved always playing that song. With Doomsday Student, I used to love playing LSD Mom. I loved playing that one. It had just such a great groove to it,
yeah,
and on stage, like the feeling of it, and just that was always one that I looked forward to a lot. Maybe I'll go one from each band. I'm trying to think. Chinese Stars. There's a song called "Panic of the Population." I used to like playing that song a lot, and another song called "Lick It Clean." I used to like playing that a lot. Psychic Graveyard. We've been the last three shows that we played the song Word Machine live, and that was really, really fun. And
yeah,
I cannot wait to start playing that song again live,
yeah.
um, moving forward, because we're doing a tour with Mets in the spring.
Oh,
It starts April 1st. We're
awesome.
doing, yeah, 5 weeks,
That's awesome.
Europe and the UK, and then we haven't announced it yet, but we're playing five shows on the West Coast in March. So if you're listening and you're in the West Coast, we'll be coming out there. So I'm kind of already excited. I visualize sometimes playing live, and I visualize playing Word Machine with Psychic Graveyard. But
Yeah.
yeah, those are probably some of the highlights. I used to like the song Number Five a lot too in Arab on Radar. That was fun. But way back in the day, my favorite used to be Attack on Tijuana. But
Yeah.
that was that
Uh,
was short lived.
I love that song. Very, very, very. And speaking of that song, what can you tell me what that song is about?
Sure. So it was about an incident where my dad pissed on me. And that's exactly what it's about. Yeah, he thought it would be really funny to humiliate me and be a scumbag. And it was about that. That was what it was about. So it was like soaking up the piss with cotton balls,
Yeah.
and my mom came home, discovered it, and the whole thing. And so when I say I was raised by a single mom, my single mother, or earlier, eventually around 6 or 7, my mom chased my real father out with a knife. And then we didn't hear from him after I was 8, I believe, 8 or 9, if I'm not mistaken. But that was something that he did when he was watching me once, and I quote unquote misbehaved, and that's what he did. So that song's about that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
just want to ask. I mean, I've had like a real like bad upbringing too. I live with a single mother that was an addict my whole life, and
Oh, I'm
still
sorry. It is hard,
today,
man. That's hard.
to this day. So we kind of our relationship isn't really there. So it's you know,
Yeah.
and anybody that's going through anything like that, it's
Yeah.
a rough time for
Yeah.
sure. Um,
Yeah. All you can do is break the cycle,
yes,
right?
definitely.
You learn from it, and my father was horrible to me, and like serial killer esque.
Mm,
But like my son, I treat him like gold, and I just give him as much love as I have in my body. Sometimes I even go and search for more love
yeah,
to put in my body to give to him. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that that's me saying that, I would never do what was done to me. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the strength or whatever it is to be able to break that cycle. And it's
yeah,
really unfortunate and it sucks. But yeah, that's one of the earliest songs that we had ever wrote. One of the reason there's actually a lot of songs of Queen Hygiene about. It happened on two occurrences.
Yeah.
That my father did that, and it was like to punish me instead of like slapping me or
Yeah.
whatever. That was what he did, and there was actually a few songs. Kidney Problem alludes to that.
Yeah.
That song on so Queen Hygiene was like right around the time that like I had maybe like 4 or 5 or 6 maybe memories, because that's what it is with trauma, right?
Yeah.
You kind of remember some you don't know if it's real or not.
Yeah.
Some you have to unearth later. New memories still come.
Yeah.
And things trigger new memories all the time. But at that time, there was like 6 major memories when writing Queen Hygiene,
Yeah.
and a lot of the songs were about some of those memories. Not all of them, though. I
Yeah.
mean, there was a song called Cop Song that was just me telling like a funny story, and then
Yeah.
there was the song 99 cent lipstick, where I was like, what about instead of Rapunzel having long hair, she had long pubic hair? I was stupid.
Yeah.
I smoked a lot of pot, but there was some more meaningful songs like Attack on Tijuana. The title really does not, we used to come up with titles as a band, but the lyrics would be, about a certain thing. And then if you hear it, it's in My Daddy Say Eat the Yellow Snow, right? So it was supposed to be emblematic of this horrible parent, and that's when you fuse it with the urine and the piss and stuff like that. That was where My Daddy Say Eat the Yellow Snow,
Yeah.
But it was funny because it's about a pretty dark thing, but at the same time, people found humor in it and found, this sort of enjoyment in it, right? And it's really what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Making the best out of something that sucked.
Yeah. I don't want to speak on that at the very end. It's kind of a dark thing.
Let's end on a high note. Yeah, let's end on a high note.
I wanted to ask, like, Doomsday Student, is it completely done, or are you guys just on hiatus? Is there a chance that something new can come about with Doomsday Student?
Yeah, it's tough. Like, so, like normally, like bands will, there's, the band, and you discuss the band, right?
Yeah.
But what happened was in the band, Craig started. So our drummer was struggling with really chronic arthritis,
Mm-hmm.
and he was diagnosed. It was kind of just a real intense illness that
Yeah.
he came down with really young.
Yeah.
And he didn't know he'd been battling it. But in a lot of times, a lot of the years in Doomsday Student, he was really in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Playing the drums, and
Yeah.
he would try yoga. He would try the needles,
Yeah.
acupuncture. He tried a bunch of things, and then ultimately he went to some doctors, and they said, you have arthritis,
Yeah.
pretty bad.
Yeah.
And it seemed like playing the drums was something they were kind of saying that it could considerably speed up everything that you're going through.
Yeah.
So we were faced with he was faced with this moment of, what do I do?
Yeah.
It hurts to play the drums because his hips would hurt a lot, and like the knees, the joints and stuff.
Yeah.
So, there was a time where he was just kind of dealing with that with doctors, and he had a surgery, and he's been dealing with all of that. And then I think a lot of it's hard to reimagine the band without him playing the drums in it. But at points we've talked about making music that maybe there isn't a real drummer in it or something, but it all just feels kind of challenging. And I've had some success and some good fortune with like a Graveyard, and a lot of it's been on hold, but I do feel like I want to promote that still. So I'm not saying that it's not going to happen again, but we just don't know how it will happen.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things that it's completely out of our control. I mean, I know that he's trying some treatments, and that's what he's been doing this year. So if it got to the point that he started to feel better, maybe it's a possibility
Yeah.
that we play again. But I don't really know. There's always the possibility that Craig plays the bass.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know, because Craig is actually an incredible bass player as well as a drummer,
Yeah. Yeah.
and an incredible guitar player. He's just this incredible musician.
Yeah.
So that maybe we do something fun like that. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Switch it up. I want to thank you so much for taking time out. I
No,
mean,
of course, yeah. Thank you.
I know you're a father, a husband, same as me. So I really appreciate you taking time out. Like I said, I was stoked to, have you say that you would come on with me and talk about kind of like the old times and what's going on new and stuff like that. It's
Yep.
been great. And please stay safe out there. I know COVID is going wild on and stuff like that. So
I know.
when you click out of this on the X up top, you'll see a thing after that that'll say share. Can you just share this because of I don't know if I can share it because of how I was locked out of my live thing.
Okay.
So
All
right up that little X right there, when you hit that, you'll see a thing on the bottom and it'll say share right afterwards. And if you press share, it'll share on your page. And then somehow maybe we can figure out how you could send that to me so I could get it up on YouTube.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's a good idea. So I'll hit X and share, and then we're good. Oh,
Yeah.
thanks. Oh, there's some people thanking us. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening.
Yes, thank you so much. Anybody that does want to see this, if we can figure out how to get it on YouTube, it'll be. Instagram felt like locking me out today for some weird, strange reason. So we'll try to make that happen for you guys, definitely, if you want to watch it.
What have you been doing back there with your Instagram, huh?
That's the thing. I don't have anything crazy on there, and then all of a sudden it was like community guidelines are banning me from doing a live. So I don't know what I did.
Maybe they looked into me and they were like, we're not allowing this to happen. Well, anyway, thank you so much. I'll share this with you, and hopefully it works.
All right.
But thanks so much for everyone for listening, and thank you for the interview.
No problem. Have a great day, and definitely let's stay in touch.
Yeah, I'd love that. All right.
Thanks, Eric.
Bye.
Have a good day.